who was born after his father's death and the one who was born illegitimately to be kings together, and they appointed regents for them. Regents, Hokaraki. But then the regents killed those boys, and what happened was the generals divided the empire among themselves. The four great generals of Alexander, they divided the empire among themselves. Cassander, General Cassander, he took Greece, the mainland of Greece. Lysimachus, a second general, he took Asia Minor, and then Ptolemy took Egypt and Israel, the Holy Land, and Seleucus, he took Syria. So the kingdom was divided among these four generals. Okay. Now, the Bible prophecy says nothing about General Cassander, says nothing about General Lysimachus. The Bible prophecy is about Ptolemy of Egypt and Seleucus of Syria. And of course their descendants. You'll find that these two dynasties were Greek dynasties. The Ptolemies who ruled Egypt, the Ptolemies who ruled Egypt were Greek. Ptolemies? Ptolemy, yeah. P-T-O-L-E-M-Y. That's general, it was the name of the general, Ptolemy, and his followers were called the dynasty of Ptolemy. Okay. Okay. And the general who took Syria was Seleucus. His followers were called, his dynasty was called the Seleucid. The Seleucid dynasty of Syria and the Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt, they were both Greek. They were Greeks, but they were always at war. They were the Greek rulers of Egypt and Syria. So, during the 4th century, 3rd century, 2nd century before Christ, Egypt was ruled by the Ptolemies, the Ptolemaic kings who were Greek, and Syria was ruled by the Seleucids, who were also Greek. So we're talking about Syria and Egypt. Now, Egypt is the king of the south because Egypt is to the south of the Holy Land, and Syria is to the north. So the king of the north was Syria, and of course, according to Daniel's prophecy, it would be the Seleucid kings, and the king of the south was Egypt, and at that time, the dynasty that ruled Egypt was the Ptolemy dynasty. Now I want to show you how intricate, how detailed the prophecy is. In verse 5, we're told that the king of the south will become strong and he will conquer the Holy Land. This was King Ptolemy I. We're on page 2 now.
The king of the south is Egypt.
Egypt. But who was ruling Egypt at the time? Ptolemy, the Ptolemy dynasty. So King Ptolemy I, he was the one who became strong and conquered the Holy Land, And the Seleucids were in Syria. The Seleucids were the kings of the north, and the Ptolemies were the kings of the south. Okay. Now look at verse 6. Now what happened? Unfortunately, these two kings, although they were Greek, they were at war all the time. And now one of them thought of establishing peace between these warring kingdoms through marriage. It's
risky.
It's verse 6, chapter 11, verse 6. They shall join forces, meaning the Ptolemies and the Seleucids will join forces by marriage. And the kings of the north and the king of the south will be allies for a while, for a short time. But the arrangement will not last long. So what happened? This prophecy was fulfilled when Antiochus II of Syria, the Seleucid king of Syria, gave his daughter Berenice in marriage to the king of Egypt, who was Ptolemy II. But this marriage did not last long. After King Ptolemy II died, Antiochus II, the king of Syria, put away his wife, Berenice, and replaced her with his former wife, which was called Laodice. And then what happened that through the palace intrigue, Berenice was killed.
Poison.
Poison, okay.
This is from history.
History, yeah. So the marriage alliance, which was cooked by the marriage Antiochus between Antiochus II and Ptolemy II, did not last long. Because when King Ptolemy II died, Berenice was put away, meaning she was divorced. She was divorced, and her husband remarried his former wife, Laodice. And then Berenice got killed. Now what happens is that her brother will take her revenge. And this is what the prophecy says. Let's read the prophecy first, page 3.
What about her son, Antiochus II?
He was killed too.
Huh?
He was killed too.
Killed too? Oh,
Okay. Now, Daniel 7 and 9 says, who shall come with an army? But from a branch of her roots. Now, Berenice is dead, okay? She was poisoned. But a branch of her roots, this is her brother, a branch of her roots was her brother, shall rise and come with an army, and he will attack the king of the north, and he will prevail, and he shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt. In other words, he will be victorious. The brother of Berenice, who was King Ptolemy III, you see, her father was King Ptolemy II. He was the one who gave her in marriage to King Antiochus II of Syria. Okay, now her brother, King Ptolemy III of Egypt, invaded Syria, and he took his sister's revenge. And he went to war with Syria, and he was victorious. King Ptolemy III was victorious. And he took captives, of course. It always happened in those times. Whoever won a war took captives. But then we're told, he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Ptolemy III lived longer than King Seleucus II. Okay, that's not an important factor. The important factor is that the marriage alliance between these two dynasties didn't work, and the brother of Berenice sought her revenge, his sister's revenge, and he went to war against Syria, and he was able to defeat Syria. So the king of the north conquered Syria. Now what happened? When the king of the north conquered Syria, was the king of the south, sorry. When the king of the south, the Egyptian, this is also a misnomer when say Egyptian, he was Greek. The Greek ruler of Egypt. When the Greek ruler of Egypt, Ptolemy III, defeated the Greek ruler of Syria, Seleucus III, he also conquered the Holy Land. So the Holy Land kept changing rulers.
Whoever won.
When the king of the south, the Egyptians won, Egypt, the Holy Land was ruled by the Egyptians. When the king of the north, the Seleucids, were victorious, the Holy Land was under their rule. So the Holy Land kept changing rulers at this time. Yeah.
Was there anything in the Old Testament about Egypt conquering the Holy Land? Is there any way it goes?
Prophecy, you mean?
Not prophecy, like did it happen? Egyptian?
Well, you have this Daniel 11.
But that was the 2nd century, these 200, that was like 200 before Christ. But the ones when we're talking about...
There are prophecies about Egypt, of course, in ancient times, like Jeremiah. Jeremiah tells the people of Judah, who were thinking of forming an alliance with Egypt in order to fight the Assyrians.
Okay.
The Assyrian Empire was rising in power and was threatening the Middle East. So the king of Judah thought of making an alliance with Egypt, so that the Egyptians and the Jews could resist the Assyrians. And Jeremiah told them, don't do that. Egypt would not help you. If Assyria attacked, Egypt would not help you. But of course they did not listen to Jeremiah. They put him in prison. They burned his book, put him in jail, and then when the Assyrians conquered Jerusalem, the Egyptians did not come to their help. Jeremiah tells them, don't put your trust in the Pharaoh of Egypt, and don't put your trust in his chariots. See, put your trust in God. Don't depend on the chariots of Egypt. So, there are prophecies about Egypt, but this one is detailed. This tells you about what happened in the 4th, 3rd, 2nd centuries.
Before Christ.
Before Christ. Okay, let's go to verse 10. And the sons of the king in the north, okay, we read this. His sons, whose sons? His sons shall stir up strife.
Ptolemy the third.
Exactly. The sons of the kings of the north will continue the battle with the sons of the Seleucus the third. So here you have again King Ptolemy the third fighting King Seleucus the third. One, Egypt and Syria.
The sons of the king of the north, like now Seleucids, they are conquering instead of the Egyptian.
Yeah. In other words, the wheel of fortune changed. The tables got turned. There were times when the Egyptians conquered, the king of the south conquered the north. There were times when the north conquered the south. So it's what shall I call a cycle that kept repeating itself. Okay, and then it so happened, the king of the south shall be moved with rage. We're talking at verse 11, 12. And this is when Antiochus III was defeated at the Battle of Raphia. Raphia is Rafah. You know Rafah is near Gaza. That was the border between Egypt and Israel. So Antiochus III was defeated there. And the king of the north had possession of the Holy Land. By the way, the Holy Land in Daniel 11 is called the Glorious Land. The Glorious Land. So when you see the Glorious Land in Daniel chapter 11, that refers to the Holy Land.
We have to start the Daniel this summer. Magnesia.
Now, page 4. The glorious land is the land of the Jews, the land of Judea. Was invaded now by Antiochus III. Now the interesting thing is that the Bible prophecy says some of the Jewish people would help King Antiochus III fight against the Egyptians.
The south, king of the south.
Yeah, king of the south. And this, they did, and later on regretted, because the successor of of Epiphanes III was Epiphanes IV. Epiphanes IV desecrated the Jewish temple. You know what he did? He set up an image of the god Zeus at the temple in Jerusalem. You know, these were Greeks, as I said. The Seleucids of Syria, the Ptolemies, they were Greeks. Then the gods they worshipped were the gods of the Greek pantheon. So, Epiphanes IV, who was the king of the north, ruler of Syria, came to Jerusalem, desecrated the temple. He put up an image of Zeus, or you can say an idol, a statue. He erected a statue of the god Zeus in the temple, Jewish temple, and he offered a pig as a sacrifice on the altar.
Pig?
Pig, yeah. So you can see how the Jews reacted.
That's what you think. That's what in the Revelation you think that's what it happened. Not some people churches they say, oh, it's gonna happen. They're gonna build a temple. It's gonna come the king. You think it happened already?
This happened, yes.
Yeah.
This happened, yeah, and it fulfilled the Bible prophecy exactly.
But some churches they think it's not fulfilled. It's gonna come in the future. When the Jews they're gonna build a temple, then that Antichrist is gonna.
You see what happens? We're taking the prophecy of Daniel 11 and following the progression of events. The progression of events. There is no division in the progression of events. We started with Ptolemy I and Seleucus I, and now we're with Ptolemy III. And Seleucus III, Ptolemy IV, and Seleucus IV. So, in other words, there is a succession of kings, like Ptolemy I, Ptolemy II, Ptolemy III, Ptolemy IV, and then Seleucus I, Seleucus II, Seleucus III, Seleucus IV. And this explains what happened each way.
But the name of the kings, it's not saying in Daniel. That's why the scholars.
No, it just says the king of the north, the king of the south.
They are not saying this is the scholars they are putting that.
No, it's not. In ours, we know this from history.
History, yeah.
Yes.
From the history.
Now, you know what prophecy is? The best definition of prophecy I have read says, prophecy is history written in advance. And I believe this. Prophecy is history, but written in advance. You know, it's history written before it happened.
Well, what's the good thing? So what? We know in advance. We wouldn't even, the people those they wouldn't even born when it was, isn't it?
But the prophecy is conveyed by God to a person, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's conveyed by God to a person.
And then the prophet writes it for the benefit of others.
It's like a revelation in the New Testament.
You know, the explanation of this prophecy is given by the angel Gabriel. The angel Gabriel is explaining the prophecy to Daniel, and Daniel is writing these things. Now, it's interesting, you know, the marriage alliance which was formed by Ptolemy II and Seleucus II with Berenice, that didn't last long. And now, as if this fellow didn't learn his lesson from history, Antiochus III of Syria gave his daughter Cleopatra in marriage to King Ptolemy V of Egypt. This wasn't Cleopatra, the famous Cleopatra, this Cleopatra,
It's another one.
the famous Cleopatra lived 100 years later. This was another Cleopatra. Yeah, but again, this didn't work because Cleopatra wasn't faithful to her Egyptian husband. So there were two attempts to unite Egypt, the kingdoms of Egypt and Syria through marriage. Okay, one was started by the Egyptians, the other one was started by the Syrians, and they both failed.
One was Bernice, the other one was Cleopatra.
Okay.